Jason and I have each spent about 25 years apiece working in this amazing field of experiential education in wilderness settings and international settings here in the United States, and ultimately mentoring young adults who are standing on the cusp of change. We were gappers ourselves. That migrated both of us to an instructor role. We both were instructing students in our 20s throughout the country and the world. Ultimately, we met as directors of a national nonprofit that was guiding high school summer programs and college and gap semesters overseas. And we've been gap year counseling now for the last decade. And Jason will talk, I think, even a little bit more possibly about that. As gap year counselors, we work a bit like college counselors. Helping families to connect the dots on sort of the next best steps in one's education. We are accredited Gap Year counselors through the Gap Year Association, and we've been keynote speakers at the USA Gap Year Fairs for the last decade. So just to give a bit of that thumbnail background of who we are and the various hats that we've worn over the last few decades, that's just a bit about us.
That's a great
Thank
intro.
you.
One of the things that we like to do with families is try and talk a lot about really what a gap year is. This is a novel concept for many families, particularly this year with COVID-19, really disrupting many college plans for students. So we want to break down a really fundamental definition that you all can use to see if gap year might be the right opportunity for you. At its core, at its essence, gap time, as we often refer to it as in this field, is a distinct and intentional period of time that you've taken in your life to step out of what is comfortable, what is typical for you, and move out into the world to learn and to grow. And we say that because there's often this idea out there that a gap year has to be a year. But the reality is we work with students who might have 3 months, or they might have 6 months, or they might have 9 months, or they might have 12 months. Some of the people that we work with are high school age. Some of those students are folks who've just recently graduated high school and are going on to college. Others might not know if they're going on to college. Others are very clear they're not going on to college and there's a different path for them. We also work with a lot of students who are currently in university or who have recently graduated, and lots of adults take gap time. So this is an opportunity that can be for anyone. What we want you to take away from this is that it's a time for you to step out of that typical life, whether it's in the classroom or being at home or in the professional world, to get out into the world and learn and grow. Now, gap time can happen all over the world, and COVID-19 this year particularly showed us how robust the US and domestic gap year experience could be. There are hundreds and hundreds of activities that one can engage in right here from the comfort of your own home, either virtually or out somewhere in the United States, as well as many countries around the world that are starting to open up a little bit more to Americans to travel again. So gap year can happen anywhere. Don't think you have to go somewhere halfway across the world in order to have it be meaningful.
Um, Again, with so much to talk about on such a consolidated amount of time, this slide we created to kind of give you a snapshot of a whole bunch of strategies and concepts as you're at the maybe beginning points of planning. I always recommend that people screenshot a slide like this, but I know that a recording will be made available. But there's a lot of things I want to highlight as you let your eyes kind of fall and maybe settle on one particular place. Maybe it's the photos of people doing internships or wilderness programs or learning a skill like scuba diving. Maybe it's the dollar signs that catch your attention. Maybe it's this idea that there are actually 3 segments here to this gap year and not just one. So to kind of give a 1 or 2 minute overview, one thing that Jason and I are very passionate about discussing with families is really taking a macro level 30,000 foot view to assess your fundamental goals of a gap year, why you're taking it and what some of your ultimate takeaways might be. And most students often can identify over time 2 or 3 primary goals or objectives. And that could be great because while there are plenty of fabulous year-long gap year experiences, the vast majority of families that we work with will break their year up into parts, maybe even trimesters. As an example, this does not need to be your year, but it gives you a way to start to really have a framework: fall, winter, spring. If you were to take this kind of model and that feels good for you because you have a few distinct areas of interest, keep in mind this idea of a progression. That was the name that we decided to put on the slide. So there could be a social progression, there could be a structural progression, there could be a financial progression. Regardless, what we tend to find as just it's a not so secret recipe for success is front loading one's gap time, whether you're launching this January or you're launching next September, launching off with more structure in the beginning is always better than less. More peers, facilitators, real content and itinerary, people who are helping to hold the experience, whether they're month long or 3 months long or even longer. What happens from kicking off your gap time with an experience, a substantive experience like this, many benefits, but one of which being it sets a student and family up for increasingly potentially more independent experiences. It can really open up what's available to you. The budget often can stretch quite a bit more and ultimately lead students to a spring or a final chapter that often is like the road trip or the backpacking, the experience that a student often has some excitement about, and parents don't feel like they may not be ready for that. But we're here to tell you that if they've done 6 months of some other more facilitated experiences, they're going to be a lot more prepared to really spread their wings independently towards the end.
In our last moments with you, we want to share that J2 Guides is a full service gap year counseling organization. We are two of the 8 accredited gap year counselors in this country, and we have tried to offer the most affordable opportunities for gap year counseling. We have services anywhere from $600 to $2,000 to support you in planning out your gap year from the beginning in the fall, if that's when you begin, all the way to the end of your spring. We offer $10,000 worth of scholarships to students. We want to make this as financially accessible to students as possible. We feel like everybody deserves to take gap time if they think that's the right opportunity for them. Feel free to contact us if you'd like to learn more.